Picture this. You are lying on a silk mattress, the faint glow of an oil lamp painting long shadows across the walls. The scent of rose water still clings to your skin from the bath you took earlier. The palace is silent, but not the gentle kind of silence that lulls you to sleep. This silence is heavy, suffocating, like the air just before a storm breaks. And then you hear it, footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing through the marble corridor outside. Not the shuffle of a servant, but the firm measured tread of palace guards. They are coming for you. Your chest tightens. Hours ago, you might have been certain of your place here, a chosen favorite of the Sultan, dressed in silks, fed delicacies from across the empire. Your every gesture designed to please the most powerful man alive. But in the harem, beauty is both crown and curse. The same youth that once shielded you has now marked you for ruin. The guards enter without a word. One gesture is enough. Rise. You obey, your bare feet brushing against the cold marble floor. They lead you down corridors you have never walked before, past locked doors, down shadowed staircases. The deeper you go, the colder it becomes. Some say the dungeon smells of damp stone and rusted chains. Others say it smells of fear itself. Tonight you will learn which is true. This is not the harem of paintings and palace tours. This is the hidden half, the one where discarded favorites are broken, erased, or simply disappear. And before sunrise, you will know exactly which fate is yours. Before we follow you deeper into that darkness, you need to understand where you are and what kind of world now controls your every breath. The Topkapi Palace is not just a royal residence. It is a labyrinth of power corridors where whispers can decide the rise and fall of entire kingdoms, and locked chambers that hold the empire's most dangerous secrets. At its beating heart lies the harem. Forget what the word makes you picture: soft cushions, music, idle pleasures. The harem is not a playground. It is a machine. A political engine disguised as silk and perfume. Every person here, from the youngest servant to the most prized concubine, is a part of that machine. And at the top of it all sits the Sultan, commander of armies, ruler of millions, master of every life behind these walls. Beneath him is the Valide Sultan, his mother often the most influential woman in the empire. She is the silent architect of alliances, marriages, and intrigues. Below her, the black eunuchs, men who have been stripped of the ability to father children, act as both gatekeepers and spies. They control access to the Sultan, guard the harem's entrances, and ensure no secret ever leaves these walls. And then there are the concubines, hundreds of them. Some are women captured in war, others are gifts from foreign rulers, and a few are boys, or young men taken for the Sultan's pleasure. Beauty here is currency, and every smile, every glance is an investment in survival. But beauty fades, and when it does, the same machine that lifted you to luxury will grind you down without hesitation. No appeal, no mercy. The harem is a gilded prison, and every prisoner here is serving a life sentence. The only question is whether your end will come quietly, or be written in screams that no one will ever hear. In the harem, favor is everything. When the Sultan's eyes first fall on you, it feels like the world itself shifts. A single nod, a single night can change your life. Silks replace coarse linen. Gold and jewels spill into your lap. Servants bow when you pass. The other concubines watch you with envy and fear because they know what you are now. But in the Topkapi Palace, love is not eternal. It is a season. And seasons change. Sometimes it's as simple as a wrinkle forming at the corner of your eye. Sometimes it's a new face arriving, someone younger, more exotic. Someone whose laughter catches the Sultan's ear the way yours once did. Other times it's politics. You smile at the wrong person. You are seen talking to a eunuch who has fallen out of favor. A rumor spreads maybe you plotted to influence the sultan's decisions, maybe you poisoned another concubine's tea. Truth doesn't matter. What matters is who whispers first. The shift is subtle at first. The gifts stop. The guards at your chamber door are replaced with ones who do not meet your gaze. Your name is spoken less often. Days pass without a summons. Then come the small humiliations. You are served last at meals. Your dresses are no longer the finest silks. You are left waiting outside the sultan's chambers only to be told he is too busy to see you. The other women begin to look at you the way vultures look at a dying animal. And finally, the summons comes. Not for pleasure, not for counsel, but in the dead of night with no explanation. In that moment, you understand the truth. In the Ottoman harem, falling out of favor is not a slow fade into obscurity, it is a swift drop into the abyss, and no one has ever climbed back. The Ottoman harem did not simply discard those who fell from grace, it broke them, and the breaking was rarely quick. Some punishments were meant to strip away beauty. A favored concubine's allure was her shield. Remove it, and she became defenseless. Beatings with leather straps would leave deep, livid welts across skin once pampered in baths of scented oils. Sometimes the blows were aimed at the face-swelling lips, blackening eyes until the features that once captivated the sultan were unrecognizable. Others were designed for pain without marks, a calculated cruelty. The dungeon beneath Topkapi was a place of damp stone and stale air where prisoners were shackled in darkness for days, sometimes weeks. Guards would feed them, only enough to keep them alive, letting hunger gnaw at their strength. The smell there was unforgettable, a mix of mold-rusted chains and something sour that clung to your throat. And then there were the more infamous methods, victims bound to wooden frames and beaten until they collapsed. Fingernails torn out one by one, the soles of the feet whipped until walking became agony. These acts were not wild outbursts, they were ordered punishments carried out with precision, often in the presence of eunuchs, to ensure every blow served its purpose. Foreign envoys wrote of hearing screams from deep within the palace walls, the sound carrying through marble corridors like a ghostly echo. One Venetian ambassador described 3 nights in which cries rose and fell without pause, each one weaker than the last, until there was only silence. The point was never just to punish. It was to send a message both to the victim and to those who still enjoyed the sultan's favor. Beauty, charm, and influence were privileges that could be taken away as swiftly as they were given. In the harem's cruel logic, pain was a tool and fear was the chain that kept everyone in place. And for those who endured the worst of it, the end was often not release, but erasure. In the harem, breaking the body was one thing. Breaking the mind, that was the true art of control. For those spared the dungeon, a slower kind of execution began. It started with isolation. Friends and allies were reassigned to distant wings of the palace. Servants who once greeted you now averted their eyes. Conversations stopped when you entered a room. The air itself seemed to push you out of every space. Next came the stripping away of self. Hair once perfumed and adorned with jewels was cut short, a silent signal to all that you no longer held favor. The silks and brocades were replaced with coarse, plain garments. Even your name could be taken, replaced with a number or a degrading nickname, reducing you to something less than human. This erasure extended to the palace records. Birthplace, family, the story of how you came to the harem, all struck out in ink. Officially, you became a person who had never existed, and in a place where status depended on recognition, that was a death of the soul. The psychological toll was devastating. You began to question your own worth, your memories. Were you ever truly valued, or were you always just another ornament on a shelf, waiting to be dusted off or discarded? Nights were the worst, lying awake, staring at the shadowed ceiling, hearing distant laughter from chambers where you once belonged. Some lost themselves entirely. They stopped speaking, stopped eating, simply drifting through corridors like ghosts. Others tried to claw their way back into relevance, only to be met with cold, measured indifference. And always there was the unspoken threat. If humiliation did not crush you, the next step would. In the harem, the destruction of a concubine was rarely swift. More often it was a slow, deliberate unmaking, until the person you once were was gone, and only silence remained. When death came for a discarded concubine, it did not always announce itself with screams or violence. More often it slipped in quietly like a shadow in the corner of a candlelit room. One of the most feared fates was the Bosphorus burial. In the dead of night, a concubine would be taken from her chamber, escorted not to the dungeon, but to a waiting boat. The oars would cut through the black water in silence, the palace shrinking in the distance. By the time the boat reached the middle of the strait, her body would be bound and weighed down. The splash, as she vanished beneath the surface, was the only sound that marked her passing. No prayers, no mourning. By sunrise, she was nothing more than a rumor. Others met their end inside the palace itself. Strangulation was common, swift, efficient, and bloodless. A length of silk cord tightened in silence by two strong hands left no visible wound that could raise questions. It was a method preferred not just for its discretion, but for its symbolism. Silk, once a luxury gifted to favorites, became the very instrument of their death. Poison was another tool often slipped into wine or sherbet. Victims would grow pale and weak, sometimes over hours, sometimes in mere minutes. Their last moments were often spent in confusion, surrounded not by enemies, but by women they once considered sisters, none daring to intervene. And then there were the disappearances. A woman would be there one day, gone the next, her chamber reassigned, her belongings removed. The eunuchs would say nothing. The other concubines would not ask. The absence itself was the warning. In the Ottoman harem, death was not the end of the story. It was the final act of control. Even in her last breath, a concubine belonged to the sultan, her life and death both claimed by the same hand. And when she was gone, the palace closed around the emptiness she left as if she had never been there at all. In the Ottoman court, no death happened in a vacuum. Every silenced voice, every vanished concubine was part of a larger game, one where the stakes were empires and the players moved in shadows. The harem was not just a prison for women, it was a battlefield. Behind its locked doors, alliances formed and shattered in whispers. A concubine might rise, not simply because of her beauty, but because she served as a pawn or a queen in the political schemes of the Valid Sultan, the Grand Vizier, or even foreign ambassadors. And just as quickly she might fall if she backed the wrong side. Some concubines became instruments of diplomacy. A favored woman could be used to influence the Sultan's decisions on war, trade, or alliances, but influence was a dangerous currency. If the Sultan suspected manipulation, or if rivals convinced him she had grown too powerful, her fate was sealed. Sometimes removing her was as much about cutting off a political faction as it was about punishing personal disfavor. The Valide Sultan herself often played the most dangerous hand. As the Sultan's mother, she had no rival in authority within the harem, and she used it to shape the future of the dynasty. A concubine pregnant with a male heir could be a threat to the Valide's own bloodline. In such cases, removal was not just likely, it was inevitable. Even the eunuchs' seemingly loyal servants were part of the game, controlling the flow of information, deciding who could see the Sultan, and spreading or suppressing rumors gave them immense hidden power. Many deaths were set in motion not by the Sultan's direct command, but by the chain of manipulations and lies that reached his ear. And beyond the palace walls, foreign powers watched closely. A change in the Sultan's affections could shift the empire's policies overnight. Spies sent gifts, messages, and bribes, hoping to tilt the balance. Sometimes the removal of a concubine was as much an act of international politics as it was a matter of the harem. In the end, every disappearance, every execution was a move. In a silent war, one fought with silks, whispers, and shadows, but with consequences written across the entire Ottoman Empire. Not every concubine who fell from favor met her end in the cold waters of the Bosphorus or on the floor of a silent chamber. Some survived, and survival in the Ottoman harem was itself an act of defiance. The most remarkable survivors were those who learned to disappear without leaving the palace. They slipped into the background, taking on menial duties, becoming invisible until the storm of politics passed. Some became healers, midwives, or tutors to younger girls, earning quiet respect that kept them safe. Their survival depended on patience, caution, and an unshakable will to live. Others found allies in unexpected places. A eunuch with his own grudges, a minor official seeking leverage, or even the Valid Sultan herself. If a concubine could offer something of value, she might gain protection. These alliances were dangerous, but they offered a path not just to survival, but to influence. And then there were the rare, extraordinary cases of revenge. One woman, dismissed and humiliated, used her exile to gather secrets, details of corruption affairs and betrayals. When she returned under the guise of reconciliation, she delivered these secrets to the right ears, triggering a chain of purges that ended the careers and lives of those who had wronged her. Some survivors found new lives beyond the palace walls. A concubine gifted to a foreign envoy might become a powerful figure in another court, using her knowledge of Ottoman politics as both shield and weapon. Others married high-ranking officials, turning former vulnerability into a different kind of power. These stories were whispered among the women of the harem, half cautionary tale, half inspiration. They proved that while the harem could break a woman, it could also forge her into something unshakable. Survival was not just about escaping death, it was about reclaiming agency in a place designed to strip it away. But for every survivor's tale, there were countless others whose names were never spoken again. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory the harem's walls ever claimed, erasing the majority, so that the few who lived could never forget what it had cost them. Centuries have passed since the last concubine walked the marble corridors of Topkapi Palace, yet the shadows of the harem still linger, not just in history books, but in the cultural memory of entire nations. The harem was often romanticized in art and literature as a place of luxury, beauty, and seduction. Painters imagined lounging women draped in silks, poets wrote of forbidden love, and travelers spoke of exotic mystery. But these visions were illusions crafted for those outside the palace walls. The reality, as lived by the women within, was a labyrinth of fear, control, and manipulation. This darker truth shaped more than the lives of its inhabitants. It influenced politics, shifting the fate of empires through the quiet influence or sudden removal of the women closest to the sultan. Wars were waged, alliances formed or broken, and dynasties secured or destroyed, based on what happened in those hidden rooms. The psychological impact also rippled through generations. In some ways, the harem became a symbol of how absolute power can corrupt not only rulers, but the entire system around them. Women's worth was measured by beauty, obedience, and usefulness, creating a legacy that would take centuries to begin dismantling. Even today, the myths persist. Tourists wander the preserved chambers of Topkapi, marveling at the ornate tiles and golden lattices, often unaware of the suffering that once unfolded in those same spaces. The marble floors have been scrubbed clean, but they still remember the footsteps of those who walked to their deaths. Perhaps the greatest lesson the harem leaves behind is not about cruelty alone, but about the human cost of erasing individuality for the sake of power. Each concubine lost to its walls was a person with dreams, fears, and a story that deserved to be told. And by remembering them not as nameless figures, but as lives cut short, we challenge the silence, that allowed the harem's darkest truths to survive for so long. History often glorifies empires for their achievements, but the story of the Ottoman harem reminds us that the true measure of power is not in conquest or wealth, but in how it treats the most vulnerable within its grasp. The story of the discarded concubines is not just a tale from the distant past, it is a mirror held up to the present. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the value of human life, the abuse of power, and the silences we still keep. These women lived and died in the shadows of one of history's most powerful empires. Their names erased their stories, buried beneath marble and gold. Yet their experiences echo in every place where people are stripped of agency, where power hides its cruelty behind walls of beauty and tradition. If we remember them only as victims, we risk losing the full truth. They were also survivors, strategists, and in rare cases, avengers. They navigated a world designed to break them, and in doing so, they left us lessons in resilience and the cost of survival. Now their voices depend on us. By learning their stories, by telling them without embellishment or romantic lies, we keep alive the memory of those the empire tried to erase. Every time we speak their names, we undo a little of the silence. So when you walk through the halls of a palace, or see the painted visions of harems in museums, look deeper. Ask whose stories are missing. Ask who paid the price for the splendor on display. And if this story moved, you share it. Pass it on. Let it remind others that history is not just about the triumphs of rulers, but about the humanity of those they ruled. Because the moment we forget them, the moment we stop asking questions, is the moment we allow the same patterns to take root again. And that is a legacy none of us should accept.